Hi guys, welcome to the Lera Studios. We're going to be consuming posts from a WordPress blog. In this session, you'll be learning how to set up the SQLite database, the content provider, and you'll also be learning how to establish a syncadapter for periodic fetch of data. Lastly, you'll be learning how to parse JSON array without an array name. So we're actually going to be using the HTTP URL connection method to actually parse the JSON object and array. Are we going to be using the WP-JSON API, which you are right seeing on the screen, and we'll be calling the make a website up.com blog, which you have right there as you're seeing, make a website up.com. And we'll be consuming most of the posts here, up to 20 posts. We're actually going to be calling using the API. If this is how you point to the API, the domain name /wp-json /wp/version2 /posts. Without this bunch of JSON will be returned. You just do something very simple. You copy all these. You go to any free code beautifier formatter to actually read more, or let's say visualize the bunch of JSON more clearly. I actually use the JSON formatter, which I actually pasted at the left hand side. And once you do that, you have the JSON right readable at the right hand side. Let me expand this so you could actually see what we're looking at. And this is actually starting up with an array without a name. We're always used to an array with an identifier or with a name. So I'm actually going to show you how to consume this kind of JSON, and it's actually easy, and you're going to get yourself acclimatized with it very soon. Looking at the JSON objects right there in the array, we're going to be needing a few keys. The link, we'll be needing the content. I won't be getting the rendered content because that could be enormous. We'll be looking at the excerpt, to actually get like a summary of what the content is. So in a nutshell, I'll be having the link, the title, or the dates that the post was actually published, and the excerpt. So these are the features that we'll be calling right there in the Android application. Head straight to Android Studio. I have the source code already. I've set it up, and I'll be explaining in details how to achieve each step of this functionality. In the Gradle scripts, the build Gradle, we're all used to that. Add your dependencies, the app compact, the card view, the support design, very important, since you might be using the quadrilateral layout, you might be using the recycler view. Once you have that set up, you sync Gradle, and we'll head straight down to the layout files. In the layout files, we'll be having the activity main, which is the launcher that houses the recycler view, and the menu item, which is actually going to be tied with the recycler view and bind, where you get to bind data to. And the detail activity will be using the web view to actually show more of a particular URL of a post. So we're all doing this right embedded in the app. The activity main is just quite simple, straight to the point. The constraint layout followed by the recycler view, where we have an ID recycler view, and the list item will be calling on the menu item, which we have right there. Let's get to see the menu that we'll be looking at. We'll be having the title, as you can know, all the way behind the card view, the date and time that the post was actually published, and the description. This is actually going to be the excerpt of this post. So cool. Once you have that set up, we're good to go. Let's get to look at the last layout, the detail activity. In the detail activity, you only have the web view taking the whole portion of the layout, where you have it set up as match parents to the width and height respectively. And you could actually add a toolbar if you are using later version, but you actually don't need that since the app theme it's supported with the toolbar, so you're good to go. From here I'll be headed straight to the Java classes. Well, we're going to have two sub packages, the data and the sync. The sync is for the syncadapter, using the syncadapter framework, while the data is actually going to have the contract, the developer, and the provider. I'll be starting with the data. The contract is just where you get to specify the content authority, the path to the table, and the columns that you'll be using in the application. I'll be using the ID. I'll be using up to 5 columns: an ID, the date, the title, link, and the excerpt. And you have that with the table post, which is the name of the table. You have that right inside an inner class called app entry that implements the base columns. So we've got that set up. I will employ you to look at previous tutorials where we've actually talked more about the contract and DB helper. In the DB helper, we extend the SQLite open helper. After that, you're going to declare the database name with the database version. This is a constructor of the post DB helper, where you get to initialize the content resolver, which will enable you to interact with the content provider. And we have the DB as well, that's the SQLite database object that gets the right table database. Once you extend the SQLite open helper, you're going to override two methods, the onCreate and the onUpgrade. In the onCreate, this is where you create the tables needed. We only need one table here, which is actually going to be for the post, with the columns we've specified in the contract. You could see how they were all declared down to the excerpt. And you create the table by issuing out execute SQL and passing the string, which is the name of the bunch of string that you're actually creating. On upgrade, you could drop if it exists and you create another one. So cool, I have that set up. A quick dive into the provider. The provider is the underlying, let's say, platform built into the SQLite database. We've added a new library like the room, which actually going to help you out in the contract and DB helper. You will write less boilerplate code to actually get you rolling. Now, right there, the provider extends the content provider. We have for the post or a particular post with an ID. So you see that right there, and you need to match the URI, calling the URI matcher. You point down to the content authority, which is for the first, to the path of the table and the whole posts, and the second URI matcher will be to the path of the post with an ID, as you can see right here. Let's move further. In the onCreate, you initialize the DB helper since you're going to be using some of the features right there from the DB helper, like the tables created. And once you extend the content provider class, you're going to override a few methods. You override the query method. You're going to override the get type, the insert, and the delete and the update method, just the CRUD implementation of the SQLite database. I will be looking at how we're going to actually get those features working. For the query, when you're trying to query the DB, you need a cursor, which you have here, to actually save the bunch of data you get back from the cursor. And you need to actually switch to get the kind of URI match we're pointing at. Is the post or the post with an ID. If it's post, it's going to call the table post, and it's actually going to fetch all those posts and save them down to the cursor object as you've seen. And if it's with an ID, you're going to actually need a wildcard. You need to fill in an ID, which particular ID are you pointing at, and it's actually going to still pass the query down to the cursor for use. So that goes for the query method. And for the insert, when you're trying to insert to the SQLite database via the content provider, we're going to actually trigger the insert post method that takes into parameters the URI and the content values, which we have as a private method, a URI method. Now what's this going to do? It's going to listen to values and the URI that is actually going to get this done. And this is actually going to insert, calling the database, insert into the table post and with the values needed. And you need to notify all listeners that the data has changed for the post, where you call the get content resolver, notify change. Now in the delete, when you're trying to delete from the SQLite database, you could delete the whole post or you could delete a particular post, which is actually also done right here. So you have it set up, content provider rolling and working. A quick dive into the sync, because that's where we actually want to do. We want to use the syncadapter to save, to periodically save data. Probably every 1 hour it's going to actually fetch for new data. Depends on how often the data change from the database or from the backend or from the cloud, and immediately it's actually going to save to the SQLite database. So that's the beauty of it. Now in the sync, you're going to have the post, the authenticator. You are going to have the authenticator service. These are just like boilerplate codes which you will use in your application, and the sync service as well. The main logic lies in the syncadapter. In the syncadapter, you need to extend the abstract threaded syncadapter, where you need to firstly declare the interval of sync. How many minutes or hours are you looking at? The flexible time, which you're actually going to divide the sync interval by 3. You have the content resolver as well, always using the content resolver to communicate with the SQLite database. On perform sync, now this is where we're going to look vividly. We're going to pick up the base URL, and this base URL is what you actually get from the web that spits out this bunch of JSON. So cool. Once you have that as the base URL, you're going to build upon that and build that as a URI. Once you have that, you could instantiate the URL and pass the built URI as string. So now it's actually usable. So at that point in time, you call the HTTP URL connection. You set the read timeout, you set the connect timeout, you set the request method. Are you getting or posting, and you connect up to the connection. Once you have that set up, you could start to read the input string into a string using the URL connection and get the input string. You pass that into a buffer, a string buffer, and you're good to go. Also, you need to pass that into the buffered reader, and the buffered reader listen to the input stream. That's what's gotten from the URL connection, and you start to read each line of the JSON. So you could actually start to decompile. At the point of reading each line of the buffer, you'll be using a method called getPost, and this method takes in the string, the buffer string, at the parameter, and throws a JSON exception. So trying to decompile further into the JSON. Now let's look at the final strings that we actually created, which are not going to be changing unless the API itself changed. We have the title. If you should notice, this must be equal with the key that you're having right there from the bunch of JSON you got over here. Look at the first key, which is we have for the date, we have for the link, we have the title, we have the render. These are keys, and the corresponding value you could see right there at the front. Those keys must be the same with what you actually are trying to extract. So we have the title, the render, the date, the excerpt, and the link. So those are the keys that we'll be using, and let's see how we're going to do it. Now we don't have a JSON array name, so straightforward, you start from the JSON array, from the post results. That's the results, the bunch of string you're getting, which is the bunch of the JSON, is just in an array. So you don't need to point to any name. So you just start off with a JSON array. With that, you share the JSON array and pass in the post string, which is the result of the buffer string. At this point in time, you can now loop through the string at the array, since we have a bunch of objects in this array. So once you loop through that by calling the JSON length, you'll be able to identify the total number of objects in this array. At this point in time, you're going to be needing the values now, the title, date, excerpt, and link still going on. And with this, it's going to get a little bit easy. And now you need a JSON object, just like when you want to call the date. Let's get to look at the date. This is the first level. Since you're going to loop through these objects, and we have the key called date, and this is a JSON object already, and we're pointing at date. Let's say the way we call that, the JSON object we gave it a name called post details. And now the JSON array, you get the JSON objects with an index, which is the first index 0, the first index of an array. And what's going to do, you call the get string on this object, and which is the BGS date, which is the date, as you can see, the key date, and you pass that to the value date, which is a string. So the same thing is applicable to the link, to the title, and to the excerpt. Cool. With that, you've extracted the necessary values. So you could actually pass those values to the content values, which will be saved into the SQLite database. And this is going to be done using the content resolver with the help of the content provider. You can see how it all flows. So calling this, now you could actually save those values, and you could trigger the content resolver to insert the values into the SQLite database. With that, you're good to go. You've actually had data right inside your SQLite database, which are coming from the cloud. You call on the configure periodic sync, and these are codes that you could actually reuse, and you sync immediately. Immediately the application starts, it gets sync. You call the get sync account. At this point in time, you're going to actually have an account for your application. So you are actually going to do that correctly. And an account created, you trigger the sync immediately. When you sync immediately, it's actually going to get that done. And there's one thing very needed: initialize syncadapter. This must actually show up in the main activity. Let's get to look at that. In the main activity, look at this here. The post syncadapter initialize syncadapter. This is going to trigger the syncadapter. Without this, the syncadapter won't get triggered. So cool. And there's some XML files that are quite attached to the syncadapter. The authenticator XML, which you're actually going to still point them at the manifest. We'll get to look at that when we're wrapping up with this code. We have the syncadapter XML, where you have the content authority, the account type, the user visible. Are you supporting uploading? Probably you're also uploading to the API, not just extracting or downloading. Do you allow parallel syncs? Is it syncable? So you actually need to specify those booleans right there. Once you have that set up, we have data in the SQLite database. Now we're going to use the loader manager based on the loader manager class to call those data, to fetch them out of the background. So we could actually bind that to the recycler view for view. This will be done in the main activity. You have to implement the loader manager, call the loader callbacks with a cursor to hold on to the query's data. And once you have that, you override the method on create loader and on load finished. So those methods are and on loader reset. Those are the three methods you override. Let's see. We need the post adapter. This is the adapter, as we all know. That's where data are binded to the view. The recycler view you need to initialize, and the layout manager you need to specify which layout manager you're using. Is a linear layout manager? Is it staggered grid? Is it grid? And whatsoever you want to use. You also need to trigger the loader. Without this, the loader is not going to fetch anything. You call the get support loader manager. You pass the loader integer with the context. With that, you're good to go. Now, what are you going to do in the loader? You just call your projection. The projection is the columns that you're actually fetching, which is the date, title, link, and the excerpt. And you return a cursor loader object And this cursor loader object also has some parameters to fill. The context, the content URI, the projection, which is the columns. If you have a clause, there's a selection clause, or the selection argument, or the sort order. All are null since we are not actually passing values into that. On load finish, you swap the data, which is the bunch of cursor. The cursor object is, when you say cursor, that's the bunch of, let's say, a result from a database. That's just it. You pass that to the adapter for use. So we're going to actually look at the swap cursor in the adapter, where you're going to actually fetch the adapter with views, with data to use. Straight down to the post adapter. In the post adapter, it extends the recycler view. You should know how to set up these by now, where you have an inner class, which is the view order. You have the adapter as the constructor, which takes the cursor, as you're seeing right there, takes the cursor and the context. And we have the onCreate view order. Now the swap cursor is very, very important in this case. This is the swap cursor method that takes in the cursor, replaces it with any old cursor that the adapter is holding on to. So it's actually going to continually make data available consistently over the view lifecycle. So that's just it. The get item, this get item is useful when you're trying to use to move to the detail page, when you are actually trying to attach intents data to the click, so it could actually fetch data to the detail page. We have that right there. I'll employ you to look at that. It's also a cursor, which actually calling on the values we've had, and you move further. Let's get to see the way values are being binded. You have that done in the unbind view order, when you might have called the view order, which is the item, the menu item. Now let's get to see. You first of all move to the position, which is the first array, which is the 0 index, and after that you call the column index. You call the column itself, and you call the value from the column, and you pass that to its appropriate data type values, either string, integer, double, and so on. So you have that set up over here. And at this point in time, you could actually call the order. You point at the view, which you would have initialized in the view order over here, when you're going to actually find the view of the name, the date, the description of the menu item. Don't forget that. And at this point in time, you need to actually call it here. So you could actually set the text to the date, value of the date. Now let's see the way we're going to actually set an HTML, because we're actually converting HTML to mere text on a text view. You test for the SDK. If the SDK is greater than or equals to the version code, that's the NuGet. You could actually point at the from HTML, which you're going to actually convert the excerpts, and the title, which are all coming in HTML format. You have that from HTML mode compact, and also from the HTML mode compact. So if you are using or if you're running this application on SDK lower than the NuGet, you could actually do it merely using the set text HTML from calling from the HTML, and you convert that to readable text. So cool. Let's see the way we're going to actually pass the link to the detail page, so that we could actually fetch the web view from the URL. We have this link where we are putting the extra, so that's the only value we are passing in to another activity, calling the details page here. So let's get to see the detail page. The detail page is actually expecting an intent, and the intent that started this activity, you need to actually test for that. If it contains the extra, post link. Cool. We only need to call the web view. You call the web settings, where you set JavaScript enabled to true. At this point in time, you load the URL. Now you have a link, a usable link, to load the URL based on the my web view object. You have it right there, my web view. That's it, my web view from the web view. Cool. With that, we completed this application. I'll be showing you the screencast, and you're going to see how you're going to actually do this. We've learned a lot. We've learned the SQLite database. We've learned how to set up the contract, the developer and the provider, the CRUD implementation. We've also learned the syncadapter, the framework behind this. And at the same time, we actually did justice to the HTTP URL connection, we're able to parse the JSON array without an array name and save the values into the SQLite database. I'll be showing the manifest before I wrap up. The manifest, you need to set up the provider, your detail page, because that's another activity you used, and you also need to set up the sync service over here, and the syncadapter XML, and the post authenticator service. These services are listening, and they are very, very important. You have to register them in the Android manifest. Once you're done, you're good to go. I'll be sharing the source code from my GitHub link, and I'll implore you to pick it up from there. And also, don't forget to strike on that button, the red button you see below the video. Subscribe to my channel. And thank you guys for hanging out with me throughout the session. I'll say bye-bye for now, and have a blessed time.